You're listening to Mystic Magic, exploring our spirit to understand our lives. I'm your host, Celeste A. Frazier. It's my joy to be with you today as our topic is the indivisible whole, knowing that we are all one because we come from one, and we are taking care of each other in any and every way that we can. Today's guest is Reverend Alex Escudero, and her life has certainly been a testament to that up until now, and I'm sure will continue to be. We'll look at things like immigration rights, diversity, inclusion, Spanish-speaking countries, Spanish-speaking people, and spirituality, traditional, and making other choices. It's going to be rich. As always, at Mystic Magic. Stay tuned. Hey there, Mystic Magic podcasters. Are we going to have a wonderful time today? Today, our show is with Reverend Alex Escudero, one of my favorite people on the planet. She is a sweetheart. She has worked for the United Nations. She's worked for all kinds of wonderful nonprofit organizations. She's traveled internationally. She's worked with immigrant rights. She's been a support coordinator for the Diversity Commission for the Centers for Spiritual Living. She's the founder of the Center for Spiritual Living in Washington, D.C. She is an amazing person, and I am so pleased that we are being with her today. We're going to be talking about the indivisible whole. And all of that means that we're all one, but that we have so many interesting flavors to us. And so we get to explore how that shows up. Welcome, Reverend Alex.
Gracias, Reverenda Celeste. Thank you so much, Reverend Celeste.
Thank you for adding the Spanish. I was going to ask you to later, but you got right to it. So what in your spirit prompted you to serve the United Nations and the Organization of American States?
Well, actually, as I was growing up, my dad was working for the Organization of American States. My mom is from South America. My dad's from the United States. I was born in Europe while he was working there. And just growing up, I really was curious about the whole world. I had a wonderful grandmother who was quite the maverick when it came to world travel. And she always said to me, you know, it's really important to be a citizen of the world. You don't have to say you're a citizen of here or there. You are a citizen of the world. And she was someone who was really generous and led by example. And she gave me a subscription to National Geographic from a very young age. And I just grew up wanting to know more about the world and wanting to serve.
So there was something interesting about your journey. I think you referenced the Buddha in some way. What is that reference that you have that parallel with the Buddha?
Yes, thank you so much. I actually, you know, I love the story of the Buddha, how his parents loved him so much and they didn't want him to suffer. They didn't want him to be exposed to suffering in the world. And he grew up quite sheltered. And I actually think that I grew up a bit sheltered, and the more I learned, I got involved in human rights in graduate school. I went to graduate school here in Washington, D.C. I went to Johns Hopkins University, and actually I'd already spent a lot of time in South America, in Colombia, and I'd seen abject poverty. But in graduate school, I studied the work of Amnesty International, and I became deeply concerned about what was going on in terms of human rights in the world, and quite frankly, the way that governments, the United States government in particular, being a citizen of the United States, concerned about what we were doing and not doing in other countries. And so my focus was very much on human rights.
Wonderful. That makes sense because you're such a caring person. Now, what is Casa of Maryland, and what is it about the work that they do with immigrant rights that helps you to fulfill your soul's quest?
That was a while ago. I was the chief operating officer at an immigrant rights group here on the East Coast in the state of Maryland. And it's a very large group that got started when all the trouble was happening between the United States and Central America in the 80s. And just it connected the dots about why so many people were coming up from Central America, and still to this day so many people are coming up from Central America. But the organization actually, although it was founded because of what was happening in Central America, ended up serving immigrants from all over the world. And even ex-offenders, people who are ex-offenders in the United States, often have a terrible time getting back into the job market or finding housing. And so Casa of Maryland is a group that serves anyone who needs a little bit of extra support in terms of so many different services. And it's actually expanded to Pennsylvania and Delaware.
Your soul's quest in that whole, I could even feel the pain when you were talking about the people in Central America, which got me wondering, well, what is it that you thought that you could do?
In a very humble way, I didn't think that I could solve all of the world's problems, but I felt like I couldn't sit still and not do anything. So I do have this wonderful gift of feeling totally comfortable in both languages. And even if I was just helping people that didn't speak English to be understood, I felt like that was something that I could do. And I ended up doing a lot more. It's a very large organization. And so I was doing a little bit of everything as the chief operating officer. And I was actually, my office was a trailer, and it was a trailer in a parking lot. And there were just, at any given time, there were dozens of day laborers around the trailer. One of them even caught a feral kitten and gave it to me.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a little bit like doing the Peace Corps, but inside the United States, because I was being exposed to cultures from all over the world, and seeing a side of the United States that I actually had not seen a lot of up until that point.
Well, why is it that you chose to make Washington, D.C. your place to live and work?
I love Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is an amazing city. And I even get defensive when people complain about Washington. It's curious because I've actually lived in Africa. I've lived in Angola. I've lived in South America. I lived in a country called Suriname that a lot of people haven't heard of. And I was often, getting to see what the United States and what Washington, D.C. looked like to people from a very different culture, and sometimes got a little bit defensive having I came here when I was very young. I was born in Europe, but I came over here on a boat, and my dad had a job in Washington, D.C. That's where the headquarters was for the Organization of American States. And just
So you didn't come on one of those boats like from Haiti, one of those makeshift boats. You came on a real boat.
Apparently the journey took 3 weeks. It was actually a big
Wow.
Navy freighter. My dad also worked for the Navy, and we actually ended up coming over on this freighter. Anyway, just loved growing up in Washington, D.C. So much diversity here and representatives from all over the world. And it's not considered one of the biggest cities in the world by any stretch of the imagination. There's enough green spaces here in Washington, D.C. that I've always felt at home here.
You came the same year that Dr. King gave his I Have a Dream speech at the Lincoln Memorial.
I'm dating myself by confessing that, but I of course I don't remember the speech. I was a baby.
But you have some kind of a tender feeling around the King Memorial.
I do. And I actually do remember much more vividly the 1968. 1968 was such a difficult time all over the world, but especially here in Washington, D.C., there were a lot of riots, and I was still a young child, and I remember feeling very fearful because I was experiencing some of the anger that was happening here in Washington, D.C. And I was so happy when the memorial to Dr. King was built. It's a beautiful place. It's my favorite place in Washington, D.C., because there is an energy there. There's so many war memorials here, and it's important to remember and honor people who have died in war. And yet the King Monument and the King Memorial, though it's a park, is just such a great place to hang out and
I agree.
be in. Yes, totally.
So listen, you have been supporting the Diversity Commission. You did that for several years. What made you want to support and be a part of the Diversity Commission for the Centers for Spiritual Living?
Well, the vision for Centers for Spiritual Living is a world that works for everyone. And in actuality, of course, the world is not working for everyone. So I saw, when I was invited to join the Diversity Inclusion Commission, I was just so happy to bring, my piece, that I could help celebrate diversity and build inclusivity, because we all know that diversity is a fact of life, but inclusion is the next step to make sure that in our movement there are people that represent all walks of life and all cultures.
You spend a lot of time trying to support Latinx people. I mean, you're heading up the Spanish ministries all over the world, and they're flourishing. What is the teaching doing for our Latinx people, and what more can this particular organization do to support Latinx peoples?
Thank you for asking that question. And this is really how you and I met, I think, is through the diversity inclusion work. And I've always admired the great passion that you have for diversity inclusion work. So thank you for all that you've done. I've always thought that people just don't realize that the United States is the second Spanish-speaking country in the world. After Mexico, we have the most Spanish-speaking people. We have 37 million people in the United States who speak Spanish, and Spanish is actually the fourth language in the world. 527 million people worldwide speak Spanish, and I just felt like that's how I could help. Our Diversity Inclusion Commission hadn't really been focusing up until that point on reaching Latinx people. And so it was really my joy to get to know the groups that have existed for years in Peru, Mexico, and Argentina, and really kind of try to tie North and South together. And I witnessed you doing some events for immigrants in this country who could be interested in new thought, and just kind of, it just seemed to make sense to me to try to help tie North and South together, so that, because we believe in, we're all one, that we don't want to be silos. We want to be, or we don't want to be reinventing the wheel. If someone's doing something great in one place, if we can communicate, we can just aprovechar, take advantage of the best work that's being done everywhere.
On that point, the ministries that are coming out of our Spanish-speaking countries are really grasping this teaching on a deeper level. How would you say that has come about culturally? Is there something intrinsic that just resonates? What is it?
Well, most people know that most Spanish-speaking cultures have a very strong influence from the Catholic Church.
Yes.
And within these different countries, there's been pushback in terms of a lot of the teachings of the Catholic Church. As you and I, as New Thought ministers, we respect anyone if they choose to believe in their separate religion, but we also welcome people to simply develop that respect for all religions and no religion, really as a philosophy. And so there have been so many people in Latin America who feel very deeply spiritual, but want a new teaching. And so it's been really grassroots. It hasn't been really, always the United States, people from the United States going and being missionaries. It's been more groups or individuals within Latin America who have felt this yearning for these universal principles, who have found new thought philosophies and just come together as communities, and then come together with people in other parts of the world who are already doing this great work.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, you are the founding minister of the CSL in Washington, D.C. What made you want to start a center in D.C.?
Well, I think I shared with you that I found science of mind, this new thought philosophy at a low point in my life. I was struggling. I was a single mom. I had a 1-year-old child, and I was working full time, and I felt like I felt guilty because I didn't have a lot of energy to play with my child. It was really, all I could do to make sure that she was healthy, and, taken care of physically. And so I felt like, everything I was like, half of what I was earning was going to pay for her caretakers. And then I was feeling a little bit, well, quite frankly, I was feeling like a victim. And I had been married to someone who drank a lot, and I had found Al-Anon. So my first step was a 12-step program. I found Al-Anon, and I, while I was in Al-Anon, I picked up a book by Louise Hay, and just really got so much from that book. And then I wrote a letter to her, and she wrote me back, and she connected me with a center that was about 30, 40 miles from my home. It was in another state. And so I started taking classes. I started letting go of the victim mentality. Mm-hmm. And then as I took more and more classes and became what's called a practitioner, a licensed spiritual coach, I was just, wondering why there wasn't a center in Washington, D.C. And so because I wanted to keep learning, I went to ministerial school, got that master's degree in consciousness studies. And as soon as I could, in 2009, I filed the paperwork, began the process to create the center in Washington, D.C.
Well, I'm so glad you did, because we need your high vibrations in our nation's capital. Now, you considered yourself what before you came into this teaching, in terms of a religion or spirituality, or if anything?
Well, I followed a little bit. My mom was a pioneer in her own country. She was a feminist and kind of escaped from a very Orthodox Catholic family, and yet still maintained. She grew up Catholic, and yet when she had her children and we were living here in the United States, she decided to take us to the Unitarian Church, and so I grew up learning about many different religions through the Unitarian Church. And it's so interesting because the actual church building where I went is now the home for a Buddhist meditation group run by Tara Brach, who's a wonderful Buddhist teacher.
Yeah. Well, next to last question, and this is about oneness. Can you share with us a moment where you truly realized oneness on a personal basis, not just on a theoretical basis?
Well, during this crisis, this apparent, the pandemic that we're all experiencing right now, I've kind of compelled myself to go for a walk every day, whether I want to or not, because I was going to yoga every day before the crisis started, before everything was closed down. And now, I don't think I'm speaking for, a lot of us have had challenges keeping up with with all the physical activity perhaps that we were doing before. And so I go for a walk and I feel so nurtured by the trees, or if it's nighttime, by the stars. And I feel that connection to God, to the universe, to the infinite. I just feel renewed and restored, and the the idea of infinite space and infinite time comforts me.
Yeah.
So I would say whenever I can connect with nature in that way, I feel that confidence and that bliss. You know, it's like microseconds of my imagination of what it is to be enlightened.
Well, you are very enlightened, and I can feel your energy whenever I'm around you. Is there something you'd like to share with our listeners about Centers for Spiritual Living DC, the services, the classes, or any other events that our Latinx listeners, or anyone for that matter, could benefit from experiencing?
Yes, a couple of things. I believe that if well, I did get a stipend from the government, and I believe in prosperity and I believe in generosity. And usually if I donate money, I try to do it anonymously. But in this case, I've just been so pained when I see a headline and it's a prayer request for me. I was called to donate my full stipend to my favorite charity, which is actually Doctors Without Borders. And because of the great work that they're doing all over the world and in the places where it's needed most during this pandemic. So, and it's such a great feeling to be able to help in some way. And I know that perhaps a lot of us feel like we desperately need that stipend money to pay our rent or pay for food. And I honor that, and I always I just want to encourage anyone listening to this anywhere, if there's a way that you can help someone else, that's really the way. It's been the way for me to feel perhaps less guilt, but just better about who I am and what I'm doing in the world, my life's purpose. So again, I don't say that to glorify, what I did, but really as an encouragement for others to feel better about themselves, is to find some place to give your time, your talent, your treasure. And then in terms of Centers for Spiritual Living, I recognize that there are many paths to God, and I certainly respect all paths to God, and would encourage people, if they don't have, if they're seeking, to just go to csl.org and find a Center for Spiritual Living near you and connect.
Yeah, and if you're in Washington, D.C., go see Alex.
I'd love that. I'd love that.
Well, it just makes sense that you would do something selfless as part of your opportunity to promote whatever, because you're just such a giving, loving person. And I just so appreciate you. And I feel warm inside whenever I speak with you or see you. So thank you for being with us today on Mystic Magic.
Likewise, and you're one of my favorite people too. God bless you.
This is Mystic Magic, exploring our spirit to understand our lives. I see what you look like as you sit in your chair. Can't imagine what it feels like because I'm not there. But I'm loving you and being here, freeing you to love me and breathe new air. Lifting you and holding you in my heart and hands, knowing you and comforting you through your fear. Though your doubt and worry comes and goes, know that all the while, God is loving you. Know that all the while, as I smile, I am God's courier, here to deliver the message. I am God's child, to touch you in its stead. Touch your hand, touch your hearts, hold your hand, kiss your head, tell you a story, sing you a song, dance you a dance, poem you a poem, dazzle you Gaze upon your face. Looking in the mirror, I see you. Do you see me? That poem is You and I in the book In Spirit in Love, which can be found on Amazon.com. It's written by Celeste A. Frazier. Thank you for tuning in today. My name is Celeste A. Frazier, and this is Mystic Magic. We'll be back next week when the topic will be science, service, and spiritual leadership. And our guest will be my dear friend, Reverend Mary Beth Spear. Please see our show notes for further information about today's topics at mysticmagic.buzzsprout.com. Please leave a review if you would. And for more podcasts, please subscribe. If this episode has been good for you, feel free to support the show. You can find Mystic Magic also at Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, and other great podcast venues. This is Mystic Magic, exploring our spirit to understand our lives.